Hey, it's Rick with another episode of
Xing the Gap.
This podcast is about building relationships, building understanding, and today I'm going to be speaking with two building experts, like literal buildings. Bruce Kuwabara is a founding partner of KPMB Architects, chair of the Canadian Centre for Architecture, and an officer of the Order of Canada. He's joined by Roxane Bejjany, an up-and-coming KPMB architect who brings a millennial perspective on work, life, and everything in between. Through the lens of architecture, which is what I studied in school, we talk about plurality in Canada, the concept of openness, the meaning of buildings, how hard it is to make great architecture, office towers that breathe, designing for mental health, mentoring from boomers, learning from GenZ, and thinking long-term. All that and the usual game show silliness. Welcome, friends. I hope you enjoy
Xing the Gap.
Bruce and Roxane, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, Bruce, if you could just introduce yourself and then Roxane afterwards, just tell us a little bit of your story and maybe just touch on a bit of family heritage and when your ancestors might have come to Canada. Just sort of a bigger picture look at who you are. So, Bruce, go ahead.
I would just start to say that my great-grandfather on my mother's side was one of the last samurai. I'm very proud to descend from the samurai. But, you know, my parents were born in Canada, and my grandparents came to Canada. My grandfathers were interesting, actually. One worked for the government of Japan, and he was sent to study the fishing practices of Indigenous people in northern British Columbia, where he settled. And my other grandfather worked for the government of Canada, and he was an immigration officer. So a lot of Japanese Canadians who came in the early part of the 20th century knew my grandfather. And I only learned about them over the last, I'd say, 10 years. My parents, with I think roughly 22,000 other Japanese Canadians, were interned in the Second World War, and they were unfree for almost 4 years. It was 3 years and 9 months. I originally thought when I was a kid that it was a much shorter time, and I could accept it. But when I learned it was that long, I started not thinking it was such a good thing. And so after the war, they headed east from British Columbia and took trains. And my parents, they settled in Hamilton, where I was born. So yeah, I'm a boomer. I'm a post-war boomer. I think what's really important is to understand who you are, where you came from. And for me, the project, and I hope we can get into this, one of the things I'm most interested in is how you become a Canadian and how you actually become a citizen. And it's taken me a lifetime to figure that out.
Roxane, I'll turn it over to you. If you could maybe give a little bit of your story and tell us who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Roxane Bejjany. I am of Lebanese descent. Both my parents are Lebanese. They immigrated to Canada from Lebanon in the 80s during the war, the civil war in Beirut. And so I was born here. At some point, my parents did move back. It was early years. I went to a couple of years in school, and then they moved back. Things were not better. So I'm Canadian, but my parents have tried to hold on to that culture for as long as possible. I only had Lebanese friends growing up, and they were my cousins. Very involved in the community, going to church every Sunday school to learn the language and how to read and write. And so my parents did everything they could to try and help us maintain the culture. Which I'm grateful for. And then, I went to university, the University of Toronto, and then did my undergrad I did a double major in mathematics and French linguistics, and then did architecture. And along the way, I had I've worked at various different places, like all millennials, and some of them were what led me to become an architect, which is where I am today. So, yeah. That's a little bit about me.
It's interesting you mentioned mathematics. I loved mathematics, and that's one of the things that actually led me to architecture. And whenever I say that to people, they're always puzzled until you start to describe architecture a little more poetically as music and patterns and rhythm. And I know when I graduated from architecture with a graduate degree from McGill, and I went to become an actor and write plays, my mom was like, what are you doing? What are you throwing away? And I tried to explain, and I keep doing this for my 25-year career, how architects are notorious polymaths, and all of these things benefit how we see the world and how we construct an identity. So I'll come back to that, Bruce. This idea of being Canadian, and this idea of a nation of Canada and what it means with an evolving identity. How do you see the idea of Canada as a construct and how you fit within that? But what does it mean to you?
I actually believe that Canadians are incredibly fortunate to be living in one of the few working democracies in the world. And that what's incredible about Canada is that it's remaining open to new immigrants at a time when the rest of the world is shut down. Basically, all the European countries and the United States, at one time, they were quite open to new immigrants. But just read the papers and listen to the debates in the United States about immigration. And meanwhile, in Canada, we are incredibly open. And I think that's so important, that the notion of openness, open heart, open mind, conceptually and creatively being open. But as it relates to what I think the potential of Canada really is all about, it's all in the wake of truth and reconciliation and Black Lives Matter and every form of racism that we are aware of, but that we have an opportunity to, I think, to do things differently. And I think the way forward is through the concept of plurality, and to really examine that and talk about that and understand what does it mean, plurality, and what is it opposite of. And we don't realize we're in this extraordinary experiment, a social experiment that allows different people with great differences to actually kind of have a relationship to each other. It's not perfect, but from my perspective, it's one of the few things that I see working, and it's constantly being argued. And it's also very fragile. It could go sideways in a nanosecond. So I don't know what Roxane thinks about that, but I mean, that's my sense of the country.
I mean, I feel like many immigrants or children of immigrants, when I'm in Canada, you ask me where I'm from, I say I'm Lebanese, even though I was born and raised here. But as soon as I'm outside of Canada, you ask me where I'm from, I'm Canadian. And it's this kind of psychological thing. And it makes me feel grateful that I live in a country where I can have that, where I can very proudly say speak of my heritage, and everyone around respect that and accept that. And it sounds like such a simple concept, but I think there are many other countries, including our neighbors, where you go and it's actually not as comfortable to say things like that, if you have a certain heritage. So it is something that we definitely take for granted, and it's such a beautiful thing.
Plurality is beautiful, fragile, and we do take it for granted sometimes. And how do we not take it for granted? By pushing ourselves to be open. One of my favorite quotes is from modern dance pioneer Martha Graham, who said, "Keep the channel open. There is no satisfaction whatever at any time. There's only a queer, divine dissatisfaction, a blessed unrest that keeps us marching and makes us more alive than the others." This is much more than a quote about dance. It's a way to look at our pluralistic liberal experiment. Accept dissatisfaction, accept unrest. They aren't bugs in the system, they're features, if you keep the channel open. Bruce, you mentioned openness, and I know that is key to not only the design of your office, but I think your approach to architecture and to living. And I've heard you quote your father, who I believe was a Buddhist, saying, "Better to travel hopefully than ever to arrive." Do you see a distinction between how you approach life and how you approach work? Or is this idea of openness and fallibility key to both of them?
I don't think there's any artist who makes a sharp division between, people say life work balance, but I think it's still one life. And I think that the really great artists and architects, musicians, dancers, actors, they live and breathe it. And it's just what it takes to really push the art form. You have to be the art. You have to really be it. At the same time, the biggest lesson that I've learned, and I'm really happy I finally came to this realization, is that buildings are just buildings, and they are not the goal in and of themselves. And as soon as I understood that, it just shifted, my whole perspective. I think that, Roxane, I mean, she's another generation, but I think what we're learning from the millennials is that they probably understand the shift in terms of architecture and values more than the boomers, who were very much interested in sort of, let's say, the object of architecture and really great buildings and great photographs of great buildings, but the actual meaning of those buildings and what those buildings really do in terms of shaping lives, I just don't think was there. And I think we're into a very different moment. It's a cultural shift that we've gone through, and hopefully it produces, a different world, because the world that architects are producing are not part of a solution that deals with anything that's truly top of mind and contemporary.
Roxane, this idea of meaning, I talk to a lot of millennials. I'm a Gen Xer myself, so I'm in between you two, hence Xing the gap. But millennials do speak a lot about meaning and trying to live a meaningful life. And I think you're often the children of baby boomers who grew up with a certain attitude that life should have an interesting story to it and it should have meaning. Do you believe that your work and your life can both have equal meaning?
Absolutely. I think as a prime millennial, I definitely, that is something that really resonates with me. But when I think about why, it really comes from, I'm fortunate enough to have had really great mentors in my life, including Bruce. Bruce is one of them. And a lot of them were architects and many of them were not, including my parents, who are also boomers. And I find that mentorship is something that has come out of boomers, that why I search for meaning and why it's important for me comes from their stories. And a lot of them have had to kind of, fight for what they have one way or another, whether it's fight for where they live or fight for their position at work. And this kind of commitment or loyalty or drive to this one goal for boomers, maybe by the time they were of the age to be mentors, they looked at life a little bit differently and kind of talked about meaning in a different way. But I think it's really making the most of your life, because they come from a world where it's post-war. They really looked at life or reflected at life in a very different way than I would, and I've got the privilege to look at it the way that I do, and I don't have to worry about where I live or what tomorrow's going to bring. And so by reflecting on their lives and the mentorship received from them, I think that's where that comes from. I don't think it just comes from, that's just how we are. And I think it's been taught to us and it's been handed down.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to be a little critical of baby boomers now. On the other end, the okay boomer sort of attitude, which came out a little while ago. What is something, not Bruce, because Bruce is an enlightened individual who has no flaws at all. What is something that you could say generationally that your generation sees things very differently, and you could be a little bit critical without being personal?
Mm-hmm. I would say some of the comments that I have received from boomers is pick something and stick to it and just become really good at it instead of being okay at a bunch of little things. And I've noticed, and I've got this advice from several people, and I've got it from employers. I get it from my parents. At some point, it's, by the time you're a certain age, you have to know what you want. You have to pick it and you have to focus on it. And that's your future. So I think that for us, we've all been kind of, we go to university, we don't know what we want to study, then we change careers and we pivot and we try different jobs and we're more open to that. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, as much as it might be perceived that way, because when we finally get there, there is meaning to where we are and why we are where we are.
In our field, I'm not sure whether young people realize how really difficult it is to make a great work of architecture. It's really difficult. I just had a filmmaker send me this text saying that of all the arts, he actually believed that architecture was the most difficult because of all the negotiations that you have to go through, especially for a large project, and just the level of technical knowledge that you have to have, and all the consultants. Like it's a team sport. There are a lot of people on teams. We have teams where there could be 50 plus people. And then you go into the construction, it gets really, really complicated. So when I see a great building, or if one of our buildings turns out really, really well, I'm totally amazed. It's so difficult to do great architecture in our time. You can make a lot of buildings, and this may become a more difficult discussion, but when does a building become architecture? And a lot of buildings are not. I don't think every single building is a work of architecture. A lot of them just don't have that many ideas in them. And meanwhile, there's some amazing things being built around the world today. So it's not like architecture is going downhill, but it's in the understanding of young people of what it takes, and just the amount of discipline. And this is where the Japanese part of me really comes in. Like, you really got to put in your 10,000 hours, to really kind of understand everything that goes into making something. I mean, that's our profession. I mean, we kind of owe it to ourselves and our clients and society to be really, really skillful. And many people are, but that would be my general comment about millennials. They just don't know how hard it can be and will be. It's not just easy.
10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell popularized this phrase, the 10,000 hour rule, in a 2008 book called Outliers, basically saying that it takes a lot of practice to get good at complex things. He was building on scientific research from the 1960s by Herbert Simon and William Chase in a paper which looked at chess and how long, on average, it took grandmasters to become grandmasters. Today, though, in the 2020s, a computer needs only a few hours of AI self-learning to kick a grandmaster's butt. And a computer could probably design a building in a couple of minutes. But can a computer practice architecture? No. At least not yet.
The interesting thing is that, architecture takes time. So, a simple project like a home renovation takes 1 to 2 years, let alone an important piece of architecture. And so the way that we look at time as architects, there's an adjustment of things just take a certain amount of time. And there's a kind of reconciliation of time and a passage of time that we're dealing with at all times. And millennials like things quickly, and we move quickly. And so for millennials that are architects during this period of time, it's an interesting kind of balance to work out between those two concepts. But at the same time, not knowing how difficult it is the only way to get through it, because when you know how difficult something is, you probably won't want to do it. So it helps to not know that, and just but be ready to do it and want to do it.
Yeah, these buildings like your like the building that I know quite a bit about because I visited it and a friend of mine did a documentary on it, but your Manitoba Hydro place, according to Deco Dawson, who's this filmmaker who's made this documentary that still has not been released because things take time to do right. And he says that building, despite everyone more or less not knowing a great deal about it, has entirely changed the fabric of the city and the way people move through the downtown core. And these days, when we're talking about ventilation with COVID, that's a building that more than any other building in Canada and maybe around the world breathes. It literally has lungs. So I've heard a lot about this building. I'm interested, Bruce, in your patience level at these kind of things taking so long to not only be appreciated, but also why is the world not adopting more of this more quickly?
I mean, that's a good question because, I have conversations with Deco Dawson. He's the one who gave me the quote sent me the text about architecture being the most difficult of all the arts. The building is now 11 years. No, it's 12 years. It'll be 12 years old. Its business case was 20 years, so it's more than halfway through its business case. It is by far the healthiest building we've ever designed because it has what's called 100% natural ventilation 24/7, 365 days of the year. It's it's like a machine for breathing. And it means that if you're an office worker, you never breathe recycled air. Plus, it has the best daylighting of any building we've ever done. And so the reason it isn't picked up is because it was a premium to build it. Manitoba Hydro is a Crown corporation. They absolutely agreed with the business plan, which was a 20-year business plan. Most developers do not have a 20-year business plan. It's shorter. Could be 5, could be 7. And they want their return on investment. So making buildings in the private sector is frankly a transaction, and it has a financial timeline as opposed to a life cycle where people's health is on the line. In hydro, the thing I'm really proud of is that there have been year after year studies of the absentee days of 2,000 people who work in the building, other than the pandemic, outside of the pandemic, but our building has reduced sick days by 1.2 days per person per year for 2,000 people over 12 years. Now, that's meaningful. Plus, the 2,000 people are all looking for lunch and goods and services, and they're taking transit. Hey, how about that? They're taking transit in Winnipeg. We shifted the modal split. 90% of the people used to drive in the suburbs. They had 12 suburban locations. Now 75% of the people take public transit to work. People have to see it. That's why Deco's film is so important. They have to see it and understand it. I don't think people who've even seen it understand it. So it's an issue of maybe it's our problem. It's the problem of communication that we just haven't let it out there enough. But it's such a perplexing question. By now, I thought there would be, I don't know, at least a dozen other buildings that were better than hydro in Canada. People would just say, we can do better than that, but I haven't seen it.
Roxane, have you seen the building? Have you been to Winnipeg to see it?
I haven't been to Winnipeg and I haven't seen it, but Bruce speaks of it and we have pictures in the office. So we have talked about it. And I mean, even within our office, Bruce, I don't think we've topped it.
No.
Even like internally, we haven't done better, right? So it's tough to it's important to compete, but it's also hard to do it.
You really need a long-term owner, which really means it's either an institution or a government. And if you really want to change things, you've got to change your long-term vision, and it's got to be way out there. You've got to really think. People speak about it. This is very frustrating because there's so much about the carbon neutral society and environment that we're going to create. And they keep pushing the timelines out. I remember when it was 2030, now everyone's talking about 2050. Like, I really think it's just political that everyone just wants to push out the deadline to actually do something effective until well after they're out of office. It sounds so good right now.
Yeah.
I mean, Greta Thunberg, she's talking about it. She knows exactly the game. It's a game.
Gamesmanship usually means bending the rules at any cost in order to win. But when we're talking about climate change and we're thinking longer term than the next election cycle or earnings quarter, there's no such thing as winning. And climate change has to stop being seen as a game at all, because the biggest losers will be future generations. Bruce and I both have teenage daughters, meaning they're part of Gen Z. That's the last letter of the alphabet. And trust me, these young people are doing everything in their power to not be the last generation of humans on our planet. Do you see any differences between the younger generation and you? I know you operate on different platforms. You might, I would say, you're probably not on Facebook. You are on Instagram, and you might not use TikTok. Is that correct? My guess.
How do you know me so well?
Hey, I speak to a lot of millennials, and there are generational similarities with how we communicate and related to how we tell stories as well, and how we face the world and what face we put onto the world. So what's your version of, kids these days?
I don't have that yet. I don't feel like, kids these days. I think it's amazing, that I find them so creative, and the things that they're coming up with at such a young age. They're born into technology, and so they understand technology in a different way. It's ingrained in their life. And so the way that they think of anything is, when they're looking at something in real life, is how can I turn this into a video? How can I turn this into a TikTok video? And they can do that so quickly. And if I were to do the same thing, it would just take me so much longer, because I just don't think that way. I've seen younger people, cousins or friends' children who are, saying, "Mom, can I use your phone for 10 minutes?" And then they take an everyday object and they're turning it into a commercial or a video or something. And it's just really amazing that they can do that, so quickly. We have students that come into the office, and they're probably Gen Z, I'm not sure, but I haven't seen enough to kind of really be able to say. And I don't think they also know their spot in their work life yet to really kind of differentiate them. So.
And Bruce, your two kids, what do you see in them that's different?
I think what I see the most that I like is that they're very open to all kinds of information. And they seem to be very grounded. They seem to have very good values, and they both have a very strong social conscience. I'm delighted. I mean, they have way more of a social conscience than I ever had when I was a teenager, and so I don't know where it's going to lead, but I actually will take those values any day. I just see it in how they want to volunteer. I think they step up on issues of anti-racism, and I'm very proud of them for doing that.
And now it's time for you to make them proud, Bruce, because you're about to compete in a game show. So are you ready for our little generation gap?
Let's do it.
Afraid so.
Okay. Afraid so, he says with reluctance. Roxane, we're going to start with you first. A few musical questions. Famous baby boomer band, The Grateful. Bruce?
Dead.
Yep.
The Grateful Dead.
Okay. It's okay. Roxane, name the 4 Beatles.
Joey. Johnny.
Sorry, did you say Joey? No, you're naming the friends. Wait a minute. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, Bruce, quickly, 4 Beatles.
John, Paul, Ringo, and George.
Yes, okay. Name
close.
Roxane. Joey was probably the furthest I've ever been. Well, it's close. Joey, that's okay. It made me laugh, and that's the point. Name a song from the Rolling Stones. Uh-oh.
I can't. I don't know.
I'm not even going to throw this bone to Bruce. I'm not going to give him a point for that, because that's just too easy. Okay, what about this? This is a little more straddling generations. Name a Madonna song.
Vogue.
Good. Okay, and can you do a little Vogue? Strike a pose? Okay, good. All right. Would you know how to dance the Charleston?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Would you know how to dance the Carlton?
Yes, of course.
Okay, do a bit of the Carlton for me.
From Fresh Prince?
Yeah.
That one? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Bruce, would you have known how to dance the Carlton?
No.
I should have given that one to you, because that way you would have suffered a bit. Finish this famous TV theme from the 60s and 70s. Just sit right back and you hear a tale. It's about a bunch of castaways on...
Gilligan's Island.
Okay, Bruce came in. There we go. Name a film by Alfred Hitchcock. Bruce?
Nothing.
Oh, there are lots. Psycho, Birds.
Okay. Good.
Rear
All right.
Window.
Bruce is feeling pretty cocky right now, which is good, which is a happy place for him to be. A couple more. Which famous film actor had a character called the Tramp? One of the most famous film clowns of all time. He wore a little bowler hat, had a mustache.
Oh yeah. I don't know the name, but I know the picture of the guy. I can.
Okay. Charlie.
Charlie Chaplin.
Yes, give you that
Yes.
point. Awesome, way to go. And what does side A and side B mean?
Left and right.
No.
Bruce?
Two sides of a vinyl record.
Or a cassette
Oh
tape.
my
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, and finally, a Sony Walkman.
I had one.
Oh,
I had
what is
one.
it? Okay, good. What does it play?
Cassettes.
Cassettes. You had cassettes. There you go.
Of course.
Of course. Okay, thank you so much, Roxane. Bruce, we're going to turn it over to you. Name a hip hop artist.
Oh, Jay-Z, Drake.
Oh, wow. Okay, you must have young people
Bruce
in your
is
life.
cool.
That's right. This
Bruce
is
is
easy.
cool.
Bruce is cool. Name a song from the last 3 years.
For anybody?
Pop song. Yep. Like a song that might have been on hit radio.
No. I like Bruno Mars.
Wow.
What's that song? Where he says Michelle Pfeiffer.
That was Uptown Funk, and that was 2015.
Uptown Funk,
Sorry, that was 6 years ago. That doesn't count. No. Okay. Name a song by Taylor Swift. Any song by Taylor.
Shake It Up.
Okay.
Shake
all
It
right.
Up. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, very good. Wow, Roxane is very impressed with how cool you are.
Rick, you gotta step it up.
Okay, what does
I
Free
like-
Britney mean?
Britney Spears.
Yeah, what about why are they saying Free
Get her
Britney?
get her out of control of her father.
Wow. Okay, I'll try here. Okay, finish these TV shows. Mighty Morphin.
Rangers.
There's a word missing.
Oh, Dolphin Rangers. I don't know.
Power Rangers.
Power Rangers. Okay, that's good. We'll give that one to you, Roxane. Famous TV show Teenage Mutant.
Turtles. Ninja Turtles.
Oh yeah, you always go for the last word first. Interesting, and then you come back. You came back and saved that one.
It's like
Name a Will Ferrell movie.
Elf.
God, wow. Okay, sorry. I'm trying here, Roxane. I'm trying to stump him. Name an Adam Sandler movie.
There's so many of them. Jesus. Oh, I know. No, the good one was Uncut Gems.
Wow, the serious one where he was serious.
Did
Well,
did you see it? Did you
I
see it?
did. Yeah, Bruce
Okay,
went for
you
the
wanna hear
serious
some-
one. Okay, go ahead.
No, but the thing that's amazing, that movie, which is fantastic, was made by Moshe Safdie's nephews, the Safdie brothers.
Right.
You want to see a great film? That's a great film. Oh my God, that's a good film.
Listen to your elders, Roxane. Go see
Yeah.
Uncut Gems. So you don't see Adam Sandler being a man-child. You see him actually being a very, very talented actor. Okay, what's a website where you can go to watch people play video games?
I don't know that. My son. Got to call my son.
Okay, Roxane? Twitch.
Twitch.
Riverdale is a spicy update of which comic book?
Archie.
Yes, Roxane, good. Okay, and here's a
Wow.
bonus. What song did the Archies make famous in 1969? The number one song of 1969? A repeated word twice? Sugar, da, 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 honey, honey.
Sugar.
Honey.
Okay, 3 other questions. Name one of the Game of Thrones families.
Ooh.
Oh. Ligard.
Lygard is not correct. Peter Nygard was someone who we don't
Peter.
we don't want to talk about him
Was he
right
a
now.
character?
No, he's someone who is being accused of sexual assault and famous clothing designer. But Lannister is maybe what you're thinking of.
Lannisters.
Okay.
The Lannisters, that's right.
Okay. 2 other questions. Name a character in Seinfeld.
Kramer.
Bruce beat you. Name a character from Friends.
Joey.
Joey, we got Joey.
Chandler.
I'll give you. Keep going. I'll give you more
Ross.
points. Yeah, keep going.
Rachel.
Yeah,
Monica.
boom.
Phoebe. Gunther.
Gunther. Oh my gosh, I don't even know who
The
Gunther
coffee
is.
guy.
Wow.
The coffee
okay.
guy.
The coffee guy. Hey, listen, my friends, thank you so much for being such great sports in this. I really, really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much, Rick. This was wonderful.
Rick, you know what would be really great if you could, I mean, we really enjoyed this, and it would be really great. I don't know if this is able to scale up where there were more people involved, but the quiz show part would be so entertaining for
we
our
could come
staff.
into your office and
Yeah.
do something. And FYI, I will be going into the KPMB office for a scaled up version of the Generation Gap. I'll let you know how it goes. And speaking of scaling up, if you liked what you heard or saw today, please tell somebody. It's hard to build a sustainable podcast. Just like any building project, it needs time and it needs people. So first of all, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for being here. My name's Rick Miller. I wrote this, I recorded it, and I edited it, with a little multimedia help from my team at Kadoons. This series is created in partnership with Leap, an online community where life experience meets innovation. For more info, visit cabby.com/leap. And as always, thanks to my guests, Bruce Kuwabara and Roxane Bejjany. Please let me know what you think or who you think I should speak to next. You can find me at Rick Miller Actor on Twitter or Instagram, or at rickmiller.ca. For more info about the Boom Trilogy, check out boomtheshow.com or kadoons.com. And remember, in a polarized world, you have a choice. Build a wall or build a bridge. Build bridges, not walls.
Xing the gap.